Zach, we got to see a hell of a race. Certainly one that is going to be up there with one of the best races of the year, which it seemed like at least when the race ended. Now that we're a couple of days after the checkered flag, we are able to digest it a little bit. Might not seem that way. It seems like this Bristol race a little bit more of a mixed review, but regardless, truly nothing like we've really ever seen before on the returns to the high banks, on the concrete banks of Bristol, and just an insane race, man. So, how you doing? What's your takeaway from this race? Because coming away from it, it was absolutely insane.
Yeah, I needed a break from staring at a TV for 3.5 solid hours because it was very similar to an Atlanta or some kind of super speedway where you really can't look away for any given point in time because the cars are just so close, and the possibility of something major happening that's pivotal to the overall race result. It can happen at any lap, and Bristol and most short tracks, you tend to kind of get into a rhythm and the cars go around and who's good. Guys going to the front, maybe guys falling back. But this one, it took everything that we know of a NASCAR race and it literally multiplied it by 5 and sometimes 10 by the end of these runs. Like it was unbelievable. I mean, we heard Chase Briscoe say, like, once they got to the end of these tire runs, it was literally like putting the difficulty of a NASCAR video game on Xbox or iRacing, whatever, and going from hard or very hard all the way down to easy. The videos were wild at the time. I know Ryan Blaney, really late in the race, he pitted and everybody was staying out because if they pit first, you're going to lose 2, 3, 4 laps at Bristol. And if somebody cuts a tire, then you're stuck 3 or 4 laps down. You're not coming back from that. So people were staying out. And there was one shot in particular, Blaney pitted, came out, and he just blew the doors off of Truex and Denny, who were still out front. It was wild. Like, it was like a completely different class of car. You can't believe it was the same thing. And the whole day was just filled with things that I can't remember seeing before, at least not consistently across 500 laps, and seeing the team scramble for tires. And the teams, or the TV was showing the wear and the cording of the tires and how many of them were in just horrible shape. And Harvick and Boy in the booth were befuddled, and the drivers didn't know what was going on. But it wasn't, it didn't get like detrimental like Indy 2008 or Texas 2022 or Bristol 2022, like where the tires were just exploding here. And Denny really spoke to it well this week, where he said the drivers got a really good warning of when the tires had enough. Like, you knew right away, one straightaway, you hit that next corner and that car just slides right up the track, and that you don't have a lot of rubber left. It's literally cording, and that's not gripping the asphalt or the concrete like rubber would. And it would last a few laps. You would see guys out there really gingerly driving around, and it got really dangerous at times because you got guys who maybe they stayed back and they conserved their tires, and now they're like 30, 40 laps of hard work of conserving your rubber that paid off for those last 10 to 15. So guys were just running completely different races, and there were times where they all converged at once. And you mentioned it, like 3 of the most not only competitive guys but the most experienced guys ended up rising to the top, and Gibbs annihilated the race again statistically, and by the finishing order. The two less experienced guys, they tended to have those issues, and they weren't able to get back to those top 4 positions. Meanwhile, Hamlin and Truex, they just led the way, and they were going through traffic perfectly. I knew it was going to get really wild at the end, but they were able to stay in a good spot to where they knew they had enough rubber to go to the end. And you had to be that type of driver to get the win. I knew that for sure.
Yeah, this was a true driver's race, man. And mentioned just the idea of like of viewing this race and with Briscoe in his in car and just watching the closing rate, and the video game comparison is so true, and it's so funny because we used to do that as kids, right? And it was really just hilarious to see it in real time. But
Yeah.
Raw speed in today's NASCAR has always been super important. And I feel like tire management has become a distant memory just because we don't see the excessive fall off. And, the addition of stages certainly kind of removes a little bit of that inherent strategy when these races, certainly play out. But this was the ultimate driver test to manage tires just with how gnarly they wore out. I mean, some of those photos, man, were crazy. Seeing the cordon on the rubber, and just the idea that Goodyear had to unload an additional set of tires. Like, we might not even make it to the end of this thing. So for teams to be able to adapt and understand where they're at, where they are with tires, and what they need to do to conserve and try and make it to the end, was really impressive. But the craziest thing is, like, this is the same intermediate rules package, same tire compound that they've used. I think the two right sides were different, but this track just would not take any rubber at all. I mean, you would see at the top, right by the wall, all the rubber just sat on the track. It really was amazing, and I don't know exactly why this could have been. I mean, I know they put resin down instead of PJ1. Much cooler temperatures. Could that play a factor just because there's not enough heat in the surface? Could potentially be, but just a ridiculously entertaining race from top to bottom, and honestly something we really needed. So just an absolute great time to be a fan. And for all of the fans that are watching as a result of the Netflix documentary and are just getting started here, like, it has been a real dream start. So if you're not paying attention, you have to start paying attention, because going to be a little stretch with COTA, the first road course race, see how that pans out, and then of course the short tracks to follow going into April. But we're really setting ourselves up here for a really great season, and to see what we've seen is just awesome, dude. Like, I'm so fired up for just how this start has really transpired, and just the different things we're getting. Like, I feel like it's not just one story. We're getting multiple different things to talk about every single week, and it's made for great racing. So shout out to the fans, because it's a great time to be a fan right now, and it's been a hell of a start to see 5 races in. So COTA is going to be interesting, but for now, I mean, we got to take it in, because this is some of the best racing we've seen in a while. I mean, certainly in the next gen, I think.
Yeah, I always enjoy the opening races of a season, because everything does seem fresh, even for for people who've covered the sport or followed the sport for decades. It's always just you get that feeling in Daytona, but you after a few weeks it kind of blends in, and you're like, okay, we're into the regular season, the kind of meat and potatoes of what we have and all that. But I feel like these 5 races have been 5 completely different races, and I love that NASCAR has so much to offer. I love that it's not the same race twice, in back-to-back weeks. You get so many different types of tracks, a lot of guys who are able to show different type of racecraft. You go to Daytona and Atlanta, then you have those long green flag runs out of Phoenix at a flat track and a 1.5 miles, and now whatever you call Sunday, that just showed a totally different side of what these guys are capable of. I said, I can't believe nobody had a spin in those last 100 laps or so that it went green. And I think that's something that only Cup drivers can do. I think if you put any drivers in that situation, they're just not equipped to hold their car underneath them and feel what the car is telling them. You have to be very educated with the lower half of your body to know what your car is telling you, and just them showcasing that skill. I think that's the biggest thing that this sport needs, because it's all about the drivers, it's all about the cars. Kamui Kobayashi, he had a pre-race press conference. Of course, he's running his second Cup race this weekend in Coda, and he said, like, with the Japanese fans, like, they love the sound of the cars, right? It's all about the sound and the feeling that you feel when you're sitting in the grandstands, and the reverb from the stands comes up and it hits your body. And he said that NASCAR right now is the best sounding race car in the world. And he's heard pretty much everything. He's heard open wheel cars. He's heard the GT, and sports cars and all that. And he said NASCAR is that brings a power unlike anything else. And that's a huge thing